Thanks for listening to Investor Insights, a behind-the-scenes look at investing with Fund That Flip. This series provides an insider's look at how our business works and answers your frequently asked questions so that you can make better investment decisions with your hard-earned capital. Now, our founder and CEO, Matt Rodak.
Welcome to this episode of Fund That Flip's Investor Insights. I'm your host, Matt Rodak, founder and CEO here at Fund That Flip. And today I'm super excited to have Ron Serraglio joining us on this episode. Ron is our VP of Underwriting and Service, where he's very involved on the front end of our underwriting and deal structuring side of things, and also stays involved really through the whole life of our loans, helping manage risk on construction draws and servicing and collections when necessary. Some great experience that we'll learn about here. But first, let's bring Ron into the show. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
Cool. So before we jump into some of the discussion around really kind of how we think about, risk management and asset management, why don't you give us a little bit about your background? What were you doing before you joined Fund That Flip?
Yeah, good question. Matt, I spent about 14 years working in the financial industry to date. Got my start way back in 2002. Was fortunate enough to be able to join JP Morgan and get started off in my career in the space of credit underwriting. So really largely just started off as a line level underwriter, kind of realized I had this analytical mindset, and it lent itself well to that role. So kind of worked my way up the ranks through JP Morgan, a few years of underwriting, and largely promoted to underwriting supervision around the 2005 range, and was again continuing on that path. Worked in credit underwriting and supervision of a group of about 10 to 20 underwriters for about 3 or 4 years, and was having good success at that. Then we kind of stumbled up into that credit crisis time frame, the 06, 07, 08 years, and I had an opportunity to leave Chase for a couple of years, and I worked at an internal auditor for KeyBank here in the Cleveland area for about 2 years. I did consumer credit risk reviews, so sort of all things risk related for that firm. And then as the credit crisis was kind of starting to season, JP Morgan sort of invited me back and said, hey, we want you to come back and sink your teeth into some negotiations that are going on at the firm. So I took that opportunity. I headed back to JP Morgan, and what started a really interesting experience for me, which was to manage the repurchase and impasse process for the firm. And that was about 3 years of really us trying to work to put ourselves out of a job. That was lots of mortgage loan repurchase demands coming really at all the banking institutions. And so we literally started that process at the bank from scratch. We invented and wrote procedures and policies on how we were going to manage those repurchase demands. And then we would hold the end negotiations directly with the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the aggregators. We were lucky enough to wind that down and kind of see the tides turn in the credit world. And at that point, I moved back onto the origination side and had good success in the impasse process. So I was promoted to be the vice president of underwriting for JP Morgan's correspondent lending arm. And so I did that from around about 2012 to 2017, managed all things credit underwriting, risk mitigation. We did jumbo loans, we did conventional loans, we did FHA loans. Really largely after the credit crisis transpired, underwriting became a whole new animal, if you will, for lack of a better term. But it's really all now focused around preserving principal and maintaining liquidity for whatever firm that you're associated with. So I had the benefit of learning those things, working for those years with JP Morgan, and took a little time off. And then I was fortunate enough, Matt, to be able to get to know and meet you through through my wife at KeyBank, and here I am today. It's on that flip.
The rest is history, huh? Yeah, you've come to the dark.
Indeed.
Dark side. There's no turn.
Rather, I look at it potentially the other way around. But
right. So some really good experience in the good times, the bad times, then kind of the call it the new times, right? Of I think a lot was learned across the industry, and as much pain as there was, I think there was also quite a bit of learning. So interesting to know that you were kind of saw all sides of that. Also, I think it's also always a good sign when a former employer calls you back and wants you back. So speaks a lot to.
Felt good.
Yeah, it speaks a lot to how lucky we are to have you on our team.
Thank you.
Appreciate you sharing that. So talk to us a little bit about, what you're doing now for us at Fund That Flip, and kind of, how some of that previous experience helps you with all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now with Fund That Flip, I am responsible for managing our portfolio. So generally speaking, any given day, that would be overseeing the projects that we have on the books, and working with our redevelopers on those projects, and keeping track of each one of those, and identifying, how they're performing, and then as well identifying any kind of early stage concerns on projects that might not be going as planned, and really just working with a team of individuals here to begin actively engaging developers when they need help. When we see that something's not going just as we expected, and we just simply are in the mode of reaching out, trying to gather the details, understand the situation at hand, and identify in what way can Fund That Flip come into the situation at hand and work with a developer, whether that might be helping them rework the timeline on their project. It might be as simple as helping them identify a contractor that might help them get a specific task at hand done. Matt, I'm also responsible here at the firm for the underwriting and credit decision making. So all that stuff coming into the front end for origination, where we're gonna do a full underwrite on the portfolio. So generally, we're looking at developers, their level of experience, and seeking to document those things and identify if we have the entities that we want to work with, and if we have a good project that we want to lend to. And then as well in the underwriting, we're also honing in very closely on the asset with which we seek to lend. So our team here works very integrally with tools, valuation tools, automated valuation models, public data, if you will. And we're always looking to hone in on the precise value of an asset before we engage with it. We find that really helps us be strategic on getting into a project at the right value and at the right price. And when we spend a little extra time to do that from our underwriting side of the house, that helps prepare the firm for success on the other side. And sometimes, I always say, always have a little rainy day fund. Well, this is kind of how we create our rainy day fund at the firm. We underwrite strategically and intelligently, and we try to get into the project in a way that not only makes sense for our firm, for Fund That Flip, but also for the developer that's working on that project. It's got to make sense for them too, because they're a stakeholder with us, and we want them to be able to grow their business profitably and turn a project right for the reason they're in it.
We talk a lot about being a responsible lender at Fund That Flip, right? It's not just about doing a deal for the sake of booking a loan, but doing one that's responsible not only for us and our capital partners, but also for the borrower. Talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned a few things, right? So we're focused, I think, on kind of three different parts of the deal, right? The first being, let's call it the credit worthiness of our borrower, right? Credit scores, backgrounds, previous experience. The second thing being kind of the underwriting of the actual renovation, right? So are we building right? Are we including all of the things that need to be, renovated, whether that's adding a new roof or bringing the mechanicals up to kind of a new standard, or perhaps even changing the floor plan or adding square foot? Like, what's the right kind of build here? And then kind of the third piece of it, right, is valuation, right? What's our current value of the property? What do we think the home, and then what do we think the home is going to be worth on the back end? Maybe just kind of talk us through at a very high level our process on those three things. How do we determine the creditworthiness of our borrowers? How do we kind of at least do some analysis around, are they building the right thing, and have they budgeted that properly? And then third, and perhaps one of the most important parts is, how are we valuing these assets? And that informs ultimately how much we're going to lend to them.
Yeah, absolutely. All good questions and topics that we can touch on. Generally a deal will come in, and our sales team will ask us for sort of a pre-valuation analysis. And so that's kind of an idea. Do we have a viable project here or not? And our underwriters will kind of do a little bit of a valuation underwrite, just get some eyes on the project. And in the event that we're able to work that through, and that looks like a viable asset, one that we might like to help rehabilitate, then we'll just move forward and begin an underwrite.
So where's that data coming from, right? Because it's not just Zillow, right? Like, we have access to all kinds of data. Maybe just hit on that real quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our data is largely, we consider it to be almost as good as what a certified residential real estate appraiser is out there obtaining.
Yep.
And that's also actually a data point we will obtain. We'll obtain an appraisal from that certified residential appraiser. But then we have our underwriters here in-house performing what we call our Fund That Flip internal valuation. And what's really interesting about this is the data that we're accessing. It's proprietary, but it is a vendor who has done a really amazing job of entering into relationships with all the multiple listing service and real estate broker agents around the nation. So they do a good job of pooling a lot of MLS multiple listing service data about real estate sales all into a central location, into a computer algorithm. Then our underwriters are able to take that tool and act like a little mini desktop appraiser, and they're able to actually pull out comparable sales that are similar to the project that we're looking at. What's neat is they're able to pinpoint real estate that we see as, what the property is going to be when it's completed. And so we're looking at it both ways, right? What's the current value of this piece of real estate right now? And we do that, Matt, so that we can make an intelligent decision about how to fund the loan. And we're not just funding the loan once, right? We're going to fund that loan with potentially a draw at close, and then we're going to hold back funds to protect our investors' interests, to protect our interests, and ensure that the project is progressing as we expect it. We're going to do inspections along the way with our own vendor, someone we have a close relationship with, someone we feel we can trust. And then we're only going to fund the project according to work as it's done along the way. So it's important that we assess the value of the project and its as-is value, if you will. And then we also do an after-repair valuation. So we're using the tools to identify both of those. We're comparing and contrasting our results to the certified residential real estate appraiser's results. And the great thing about that is that individual's got like boots on the ground. They're there, they see the property, they're at the real estate. We definitely always want that piece taking place, even though I'll be honest with and telling you, I often err and feel stronger and more comfortably leaning towards the valuations that we identify internally. More often than not, we're soft on that value. In other words, we come in under the certified residential real estate appraiser's opinion. For one reason or another, the delta is usually not huge, and we pride ourselves on trying to be really accurate with that number. But in the event that we come in softer than the appraisal, unless that appraiser wows us with some data that we just had no clue about, we're going to err on the side of caution and, generally speaking, going to lend towards our internal valuation.
Yep. So valuation, very important, as I think you mentioned, right? There's kind of two values depending on the point in time, right? There's the property and its current condition. What's it worth? We want to make sure that our borrower is not overpaying for that property, and therefore we're kind of advancing more capital than our loan to as is value ratios say we want to do, and then also kind of on the back end, how much is this thing going to be? How much is the property going to be worth once it's completed? And we also have loan to value ratios that we want to stay within there. Very important part. We've got a lot of data, both kind of at our fingertips that we analyze. And I think you're right. Our numbers are oftentimes, we've studied on the back end when these properties actually sell. Our numbers tend to be a bit closer to reality than the appraisals. And that's not to say that I think it's more to do with we just get so many reps at this, right? Like this is all we do are these active renovated valuations. Like we're doing 10, 15, 20, 30 or more a day sometimes, I think. Keep in mind an appraiser's primary function is doing Fannie and Freddie loans, right? And it's just a little bit different of an
that's exactly it, Matt. You hit the nail on the head. And that's what I've seen as I've been here over the past 6 months, right? I worked with a host of underwriting experts over the years, and my last years at JP Morgan, they bifurcated the whole process, right? We invented credit underwriters and collateral underwriters.
Yep.
So we carved off a whole group of folks that only focused in and honed in on valuation. And what's wild to me is the crew here is far more adept at valuation analysis on these construction projects. They're pulling out the statement of work. We look really closely at that, right? Like after you've seen 50 or 100 of those things, you generally start to get a good idea, about what it should cost, materials and labor, and so you can start to lean in better or more effectively than an appraiser can, who just might not be used to always seeing that as their assignment to perform a subject to appraisal.
Yep. So let's talk about that. We're kind of going in reverse order here a little bit. We talked about valuation.
Sorry about that.
Totally fine. It's where we spend most of our time on our underwrites is valuation, right? We're primarily asset underwriter. Talk to me a little bit about the work we're doing around looking at the statement of work and kind of feeling out whether or not that budget is the right budget for the particular project in question.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes straight to the statement of work, and we're gonna look in on that pretty closely and try to identify. Generally, it starts at a high level, Matt. Right? We're trying to understand what's the scope of work we're doing here. Could it be just a small cosmetic rehab? We're just doing some interior finishes, or we're looking at a more major project, whether it be a single or multi-family residence where it needs roofing and or foundation work or issues. Sometimes we do projects where we're expanding them, right? Adding new square footage, increasing the number of units. It's a whole sort of gamut of stuff, if you will. But when you move into the more complex project, where you're going to do a larger statement of work, our organization's concern naturally goes to the level of experience with the entity and the individuals that we're entering into the transaction with. And simply put, right, we just want to be sure that the folks that are going to work on this project are used to having seen, similar size and scope projects. If they're going to have to subdivide a project, have they done that before? Have they worked with a city or a municipality? We look at as well geographical familiarity, and that's to say, that's the same appraiser who knows their area is comfortable giving you a valuation in the area. Well, kind of the same goes for a redeveloper. If they're established and they've done a lot of perhaps a number of units in a certain suburb or a certain city area or a certain city limit, tend to largely start to think that individual or that entity is skilled in that space and knows the area well and knows some of the tricks and traps, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So experience is a huge deal for us. That, as you can imagine, ties right into the developer's background. What space do they work in? What's their work history? How many projects of similar nature have they been through in the last year or two? And how have those performed? Like we generally like to see the work that's being performed, and picture's worth 1,000 words. So
Yep.
we love to see the photographs. Yes, of course we want to document the existence of that flip taking place, but we like to see the level of work being done, and then we draw those conclusions about that intuitively from there. And then I would say the third pillar there is we look at the entity and the borrower's character, right? We do look at credit. We have a minimum credit score and tiered grid that we write to. And naturally, Matt, as you can understand, within those tiers, we have ranges. And so we price accordingly for risk. And naturally, we always want to work with the most experienced developers, but everybody has a certain range of experience. And so we like to categorize that. And so generally what I'll tell you is we won't work with someone who does not have experience. That's just, that's very speculative in nature. You don't exactly know what you're getting into. But we are willing to help individuals grow their business from a sort of a smaller start. It's just those transactions will let you know how many flips that developer or how many projects that developers worked on in the past several years. And you'll see that accordingly in the pricing that you get.
Yep. So we're looking at, has this person done it before, and do they have some proven capabilities around being able to execute not just a cosmetic flip, but, if they're asking for a more sophisticated scope, have they also, executed something that has more of a significant scope, right? You mentioned credit. We're running background checks. We're looking at the statements of work and making sure they're doing the right kind of build. And then ultimately, we're putting all of that together into evaluation, right? And do we have the right values both on kind of the current purchase price as well as the outsell or out refinance? And do we believe there's a high probability that we're going to get paid back through some type of call it a liquidation event, whether that's a sale or a refi? Very cool. And this is certainly a big part of our business, right? We got to get it right on the front end, on the underwriting side. And I think, a lot of people probably don't completely appreciate the amount of risk management that goes into these loans throughout the life of the loan, right? So it's one thing to originate a loan and everyone celebrates and we get excited, we put a new loan on the books, but it's kind of just the beginning, right? Now the developer has to go through and oftentimes demo the property, which can diminish the value of the home. They have to get contractors in there and deliver work on time and maybe just talk us through, because you guys are this is a big part of what we do, and I think the service we provide to our investors. Talk us through some of those things in terms of what we're looking for and how we manage risk throughout the life of the project, and why is that why that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely happy to do that for you. Really, it does. It starts with the origination of the loan, and we will. We'll set the loan up for a construction budget. We do a few things to help mitigate the risk along the way. And generally speaking, we're looking for our developers to complete a percentage of work after the loan closes before we would think about moving in to fund the construction draw on their request. And typically that ranges in the area of about 15% of the entire project. And so largely we'll have a developer who contacts us, says, hey, I've been chugging along here, we've got your project kind of ready for our first draw. I'm 15 or 20% done with the improvements. At that point, Matt will engage, as I said, a vendor to go out and perform an inspection. Happy to tell you, we have a close relationship with just one inspection vendor. And the reason being, we like to know our vendor and have that close relationship. So that vendor schedules all our inspections. They know exactly what we're looking for. They perform a detailed interior and exterior inspection. We obtain literally a line item by line item report on the percentage of completion that's been obtained, the dollars of completion that equate to that, and then as well just a high level of detailed pictures that we obtain, just to be sure that we can see that the photographs of the work being performed line up to the line items of the work completed. That's how we choose to fund a project. Then along the way, right, Matt, we also don't just wait for a developer to reach out to us on a project. We like to actively manage the portfolio. And so that's something we've been ratcheting up and doing more and more of. since I joined the organization, and I'm happy to see like a lot of relationships starting to grow with our developers by doing that. We're reaching out. We're sometimes just saying, hey, checking in, how's things going? When are you ready for a draw? Do you think you'll be ready for a construction draw? Maybe the property's all done, and are you thinking about listing it soon, or how's that refinance coming? It's kind of just a progress check, and it's good to keep those lines of communication open. So often we find out about a hiccup along the way, and sometimes the developer, you never know, right? It's that whole knocked out the wall and didn't expect to see that there. We always want to know when that's there, and so I say to developers, I've been having conversations lately and say, how come you didn't call us? And they're like, geez, I didn't know I needed to. And so we're starting that cadence where it's not that you need to, it's just that we like to. We want to stay in touch, and we want to keep that status on the project, if sometimes for no other reason, so that we can go out and have a transparent share with our capital partners, with our investors, and just let them know where it's at and what's going on. I've got so many communication and email exchanges and interactions with investors since I joined the organization. They say to me, sometimes they say, Matt, they say, I didn't love your last platform update, but really do appreciate the candid transparency with which you come forward. And it's just to say that we're going to let you know what's going on with the project. Yep. We're not going to be in love with 100% of every single project on our books, but when one of them doesn't go as expected or as planned, our intention is to be transparent, forthright, and then to take the actions that will secure and protect our interests, our investors' interests, and also developers too. Like we want the best outcome for all parties involved. We want to return principal and see that our investors get to enjoy an interest stream and help our borrowers grow that business on the other side. So It doesn't always pan out that way with every single transaction, but we spend I would say huge amount of time thinking intuitively, talking through projects, having committee meetings, just to identify and ensure that we're taking the best course of action.
Yep. It's about being proactive, right? Managing what we can manage, which sometimes means, things happen with the project that no one could have done anything about. But what we can manage is how we communicate that and the transparency we provide. So similarly, right? I talked to a lot of investors, and it's they just want to know what's going on, right? And most of them are investing in something that does come with some risk, right? It's offering the return that it's offering for a reason. We believe we owe it to you out there listening what's going on, to let you know what's going on. So that's what we do. All right, cool. This is great. And yeah, a very big part of our business, especially as our book has grown, has been what Ron is talking about, of being proactive around staying on top of our borrowers and being helpful where we can, and making sure that we're communicating what's happening back to our investment partners. And we've seen some good things result from that. So maybe we can shift into next, Ron, let's talk about a project, right? A project that wasn't all sunshine and rainbows per se, and some things came up that had to be dealt with. What was the situation? What kind of options were presented to the borrower? How are we thinking about managing risk, and kind of a number of different scenarios that could have played out? Maybe let's just talk about one that's real that you're working through or have recently worked through.
Sure. Yeah. One immediately comes to mind off the top of my head. We have a property in the Carolinas, and it's right on the coast. It's a gorgeous home, got a gorgeous view of the ocean. It is literally a beachfront property. So those of you listening, I'm sure
started off as sunshine and rainbows. Then
yes, it did. That's what makes it go right to this one, because this project was actually affected by Hurricane Michael back in, if you'll recall, early of October 2018. And so there was a pretty sizable storm surge associated with that hurricane. And the folks had talked as, kind of the sky is falling kind of approach when that one was first coming through. And I had recently joined the firm, and I remember going through a mode we even identified every single property we thought we might be in risk. I was assessing the mileage inland of certain units and projects, and really this one project was the only one that was kind of right in the eye, right in the way of the storm, if you will. And interesting thing, right? We came out to the other side of that hurricane, and we got in the mode of, well, hey, maybe we should engage these developers, right? See if they're okay. Like, that was the first thing I said. And some folks in the firm's like, well, what about the property? What about the property? It's like, I'm not sure that the developer had much they can tell us about the property the day after the storm, right? They probably had evacuated the area like everyone else in town. But we still said, let's call and ask how the people are on the other side of this thing first, and just try to understand that. So we engaged the developer, and luckily they were okay. They had made it to high ground. They let us know that. Naturally, they were concerned about the project, as were we. So from there, we moved quickly to schedule what we call a DIR, a disaster inspection report. And so we sent our team out and had them look at the real estate and do a full report. It's about a week and a half after the storm. Come to find out, yeah, for sure, there was some water damage to the property. And so that's when everyone starts scratching their head saying, okay, do we still have a viable project? How much money do we have out the door? How much has been invested in the rehabilitation already? So this was just a unique one because the developer is such a nice guy, had numerous conversations, and we've stayed in touch along the way. We've been working with them to see the cleanup through, which is now complete. The project is back on track and actually nearing completion as we speak. So this is going to, what I'm hoping, turn into a success story, right? Project's not complete yet, so we never know until that exit happens and takes place. But I'm excited to say that really, this will be one we work through, and the project was delayed along the way. So after that storm hit, it was, almost 45 to 60 days to clean up the project, secure resources into the area. The neighborhood is now in mode of cleanup. And so we've had recent dialogues with the developer, and his position is this. He says, Ron, I'm on the fringes, right? Project's going to be done. It's going to look pretty. We're going to have, excited buyers to be able to get a piece of real estate right on the beach here. But I'm not so sure about the marketing right now, is what he says. And I think I get that, right? You're in the middle of winter seasonality. I know the Carolinas don't see as much of it as we do up here in Cleveland, but if I recall correctly, they got blasted with some snow right at the beginning of the holiday. So, yeah. So he just said, look, I'm in a good place financially and with the project, but I just need some time to market this. And so can you help me out? And we want to exit all projects right when we say, but the reality of it is that can't necessarily always happen. Sometimes, like you said, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. So on this one, it's a reasonably sensible conversation to have with the developer to say, yeah, we think we probably could extend your loan 3, maybe even 6 months. What I generally observe is each time you have a loan extension, right? The statistical probability of default increases a little bit. So, there's a small fee associated with having to take a loan out further. But the win for our developer here is he says, look, I don't want to have to go refinance the loan, pay more points, pay more fees, pay more closing and title work and all those things. And so for us, it just seems like a sensible approach. We'll roll the fee in and extend the loan out. That will give this individual time to list it for sale on the MLS and market it. Mm-hmm. We look at it as potentially a viable outcome for investors. Sure, we're not returning the principal on the day that they wanted, on the date of maturity, but we did let them know we may extend the loan should something come along. And this is kind of the perfect sort of case where we would like to extend the loan, just because who can control Mother Nature?
It makes sense at the end of the day, right? And I think we get this question a lot, what do you guys do when a loan goes into quote unquote default, right? And there's a lot of different ways, I think, to define default, whether it be
Sure.
The term of the loan comes up, the borrower stops making interest payments. They do something else that, trips up one of the covenants of the loan. And I think, my answer is always, well, it depends, right? Like what do we do is what we're trying to do, I think is, and you guys do a good job of this within this group, is we're trying to preserve principal, right, and get to liquidity, right? It's kind of the overarching theme. And sometimes that means extending the loan. Sometimes that means increasing the dollar amount of the loan, right? So the borrower has more capital to finish the project. Sometimes that means going to foreclosure, right? That's usually, I think, our least likely path, or the path that is generally not the best for everyone.
Foreclosure is our least desirable outcome, right? That's the last thing we want to move to. It's not to say we won't go there if we need to. And sometimes we could concurrently be prepared to move through those steps, but it's the least desirable. So we're always exploring our other options wherever possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like, we're typically running more than one strategy at once, right? We're saying, hey, let's give the borrower or the developer some more time if needed. But we may also be setting, a backup plan in place so that if, certain milestones aren't hit, we've got things lined up that we need to have lined up in order to, again, achieve that goal of protecting principal and getting to liquidity. I think the other way we think about it, right, is like what's the problem? Is it an operator problem, a developer problem, or is it a project problem? I think in your example is a great example of it's more of a project problem, right? In this case, a weather problem that caused the project problem. Like our best path forward was through an engaged borrower, right? And making sure that they're still aligned with us to finish it. So, I think that's a big part of what, how we think about moving things forward is, do we still have a borrower that's aligned and engaged with us? If so, let's make sure that we keep them a part of the process. If not, and I would say this is more rare, if we don't have an aligned borrower or aligned partner, that's when we're really moving to removing that party from kind of the situation, so that we can get the asset back and again get to that liquidity. So
yeah, that's exactly it. That's a little something different for me in this experience, Matt, in that we are very always closely engaged with developers and seeking to keep that relationship alive, regardless of where the project is going, good, bad, indifferent. In my former experience in my career, a loan goes into the NPL state or non-performing loan, and that's kind of the end of the dialogue between borrower and lender, and it's usually become adversarial in the experience from there. And what's neat to me in this experience is the relationship hasn't become adversarial with these developers, and we remain in touch. And so much of our team is out there engaging and trying to get the next piece of information that we need to make the strategic and intelligent decision. And I think we do ourselves a service there, and maybe the industry's done itself a disservice over time by allowing the relationship just to go by way of adversarial sort of approach, and no one's talking to anyone. The best chance forward for us is to work something out and maintain the relationship with the developer, even if we have to go down that road that we don't like to.
Yep, totally. Cool, Ron. Well, this was great. Let's get out of here maybe on a fun note. When you're not making dreams come true here at Fund That Flip, and making sure we're doing the right thing by our borrowers and investors, what do you like to do for fun?
I love to snowboard.
Snowboard.
All
right.
The time of year for it.
Have you gotten out much this year?
I have not. I'm batting 0 this year.
Oh man.
Maybe because I got my heart and soul poured into Fund That Flip right now.
I have to kick you out of the office and get you out to the slopes then, I guess.
Just maybe, but perhaps it's a feather in your cap. You guys keep me so busy, I haven't even realized I haven't been out to the mountain this year.
Oh, man. I might have just done myself a disservice then, I guess, huh? No.
Maybe I just got old along the way.
Yeah. Well, cool. Appreciate your time, Ron. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out?
If you'd like to speak with me, by all means, Ron, R-O-N, @fundthatflip.com.
There it is, everyone. Appreciate your time, Ron, and sharing a little bit more about what you do here. Also appreciate everyone that was listening. We're still looking for feedback and ideas on what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like us to cover on future episodes here of Investor Insight. So feel free to shoot those over to investorrelations@fundthatflip.com. Otherwise, be sure to check out our blog for more content, and be sure to tune in next week where we'll be talking to more of the team here at Fund That Flip. And giving you some additional insights into how our business works so that you can continue to make informed investment decisions. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, this is Matt signing off.